PLG your product is typically pretty simple, so you should be able to pull out like a few things that like everybody likes to use and make sure that people feel empowered to use your product.
That's Dorothy, with top performing sales rep. She was an enterprise at DemandBase. She got almost 800K in qualified pipeline generated within 2.5 months. At Lavender, she generated 1.3 million in pipeline for SMB mid-market enterprise segments. And she is a top 100 powerful women in sales in 2023. And she was a top 25 years to follow in 2022. In today's episode, you will learn the difference between a PLG environment and a sales one, how to leverage product data, and the focus on being a product expert and the first call within the PLG motion. So Dorothy, from your experience, how do you make the difference between prospecting in the PLG environment versus a more traditional sales-led motion?
I would say with PLG, you are a little bit more informed, and I would say you have more plays at hand that you can use because you have a simple to use free product compared to sales-led, where typically your product's a little more complex, requires a lot more. And so when your form of nurturing and awareness is a lot easier with PLG than it is with the sales-led motion. But in terms of like outbound, I would say they're very similar. You just have in PLG, you're lucky to have this complementary piece to it as you outbound.
Actually, if I just to share also, for me, right now, the current job I'm working at, that's the first time I'm working for a PLG company. And that's exactly the way I'm feeling it. It's outbound with more data. So that's great. And if you can give one, what's a standout haha moment or revelation you had while transitioning from a sales motion to PLG at Mural?
It's actually understanding how to use the data because there is so much, right?
Yep.
Whereas, traditional sales-led, you might be lucky enough to have an intent data platform and like a Zoom info or just contact data and LinkedIn Sales Nav. With PLG, you get to use your product data to your advantage. Start to understand like what qualified opportunities could look like and also inform your outbound better because there could be lookalikes of what's coming in terms of your inbound, your product signups, not necessarily always inbound.
Yeah. What do you mean with lookalikes?
If you see an account that has a lot of signups and that could be a product qualified account because you're seeing a lot of usage to you can infer that, hey, their competitor could be a possible prospect for you because this company is trying to solve for this problem. I'm pretty sure, this next person's going to have something similar. And you can start reaching out based on that information.
Okay. Now I want to focus more to your experience at Mural because when we were preparing the episode, you mentioned to talk about, we are going to talk about prospecting within the PLG environment. And let's focus at Mural, for example. So when you started to work a new account on your list, what was your step-by-step process to go after this account? And could you give us an example?
When I first started, I actually didn't dive too much into it until I spoke with all of the reps around me first.
Okay.
To understand what they were looking for in their accounts. That way, I could form an opinion or a hypothesis on like what a good qualified account looked like. And then I would use that information to then tier my list out in terms of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3.
And you started to talk about product data actually for product usage. So can you break down how you use product data to make your prospecting effort more effective?
Yeah, so tier 1 accounts were the ones that looked the most alike to opportunities that have moved into pipeline or have closed won. Those to me were considered best fit accounts. And then tier 2 would be maybe they had some of those criterias or product usage Also, tier one also prioritized by how many people were signed up, how much product usage was in the account. And then tier two would be a little bit lower. They don't meet all the qualifications that tier one has, but they have some. And then tier three is probably like the free for all, where they were completely cold, didn't know about the product, didn't know about the company or anything like that.
Let's talk about the example you just mentioned here about the product usage. They are using the collaboration session, for example. You mentioned that if they are remote, you mentioned that in your email. So call to action is, what's your experience so far? So what's the next step?
When I think about it, right, now you have a product qualified account. You've seen a lot of users. And then what about those people or how they're using the product makes it potentially a qualified, right? So you want to know, are they a power user because they're using it a lot, there's a higher chance that they're going to convert. Are they, a light user? They're just in it, poking around, checking out things, or kind of dormant. They signed up, didn't do anything, or they could be a past user. Counts the trial or freemiums kind of like died out. So with that in mind, right, you want to prioritize the people who are using your product the most or have recently used your product. That way, that familiarity and your product and company is top of mind, and create messaging around what you've seen them use inside of your product. So, for example, if I, like at Mural, if I notice that they've created multiple sessions, collaboration sessions, I know that they're using the product a lot, and then I can look up the company. I can see, are they remote, hybrid, in office? That'll tell me even more, and so I can create a message based on that information, like, hey, it looks like your company's working remote. I noticed you signed up for Mural. You've used the product quite a bit. Curious, like how your experience has been. It's a little slightly different approach from sales led, right? Where you're like, are you interested in talking to me? Versus, now you have all this data. You're making a hypothesis, and I would say you take a little bit more of a customer success position, and your job then is to guide them to a place where they're ready to purchase.
Yeah, and to follow up on, because you are talking about the first call, do you have like a checklist on what's your goal on this first call? Do you want to see where they are in their buyer journey, to see if they are already ready to buy, or if they are just starting to use the product? Do you want to educate them? So what's your goal on this first call?
Yeah, so I think this is the point where I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it. It's being talked about a lot on LinkedIn about like buyer enablement, right? This is the point where you become a product expert and you enable your buyer on how to be their own product expert and eventually be in a place where they're ready to buy. You can also use that time where if you are able to have a conversation, because you're like, hey, you can offer like a small demo or something like that, because your product is simple, right? You can kind of do a little demo or show them key features that are important for them as they work through their journey, and use that conversation as a way to do like discovery. So you can start asking like, hey, how's your experience? You can also ask like, why did they decide to sign up? Boom. They'll be like, oh, well, we're struggling with this and we needed a tool to do this, right? That's a problem. And then you can always use that conversation to dive deeper. If you're pointing to specific places in your product, it also helps you understand like what are they getting excited about, because that's a potential pain point, right? If without that, what's the pain? And especially when I think this is really important to know, like when you're outbounding cold outbound, if you know if you know your features and what specific pains they solve and business impacts they have, people use them, and make sure you talk to your existing customers. It'll help you understand that even more. You can use that messaging, that learning to go outbound and have very, very clear messaging when you are reaching out to people.
So if you gave us an example earlier about how you use product data. Do you have another example you want to share on how you are using product data?
Yeah, I'm really big on meeting people where they're at. So I'm never going to try to push meeting an AE if they don't need it. My goal, especially if this isn't a target account, if you as an SDR can create a champion through the product, do that. But if you are able to work with your AE and develop that kind of strategy, how you can build multiple champions using your product, that's game changer. Um, but yeah, the goal is to just understand where this person and this account is in their buyer journey. And then it's no longer from awareness of product, but it's awareness of pain and the problem that you're solving for.
For those who are not familiar with the PLG motion at Dropbox, can you explain what they did with their PLG motion?
Yeah, I mean, we did that. I helped build some of that out at Lavender as well. It was a little bit less rich of data, I would say, but if you are seeing lots of sharing, like a virality effect, if you see a lot of people sharing the product, they're already a champion in that way. They're ready to I would say those people already have some sort of conversation. I don't know if they're at the champion influencer level or decision making level, but they're somewhere in there where they love your product so much that they're willing to share it with other people. And so I think that's a good signal. I think if you guys look up how Dropbox's PLG strategy, it'll actually teach you a lot from like what makes the product so easy to sell and like how you can use that information for your own PLG strategy. But yeah, I mean virality, right? If you see somebody sharing, whether it's online or in your product specifically, I hope you guys have a share button on your product. It's really important. It'll help you understand like how much excitement, how interested they are in your product. And you can do two things with that. You can encourage them to share more and create messaging that helps, to call out other potential users in the account. And then you kind of your own demand gen at that point. Like, hey, give this a free trial because somebody else is using it already. And then at some point, because there's so many users, you have your own product qualified account. You're not waiting for marketing. You're creating your own demand gen, your own qualified accounts, and then you can then convert them.
And actually, that was another question I had about building reports. So for those who are trying to build reports, their first reports for PLG motion, what are the top 5 metrics or data points you believe should be included on this report?
Their first thing was to make a product so simple that it would be easy as signing up and getting in and getting started. And then their next big thing was the virality factor. How easy can it be to share with other people? I would say those were the two main bases. I think I'm missing one because it's been a while since I read the article, but that's the beauty of PLG in general and why they have free trials, freemiums compared to more complex products. But it also, I would say, it puts you in an interesting position as sellers because you have to become a product expert and you have to become good at data. And some organizations will have your RevOps person take care of that, or at Dropbox, I believe they have like a product growth kind of person that takes all of that information into account and then gives it to the sales team. But if you want to get ahead of it, learn to create your own reporting and understand the data before anyone else does, and that'll set you apart.
Right now, where I'm at my company at GoApples, I can start building the reports, but I'm still missing some data. So I still need to go to our own tool, for example, to get some data. So right now I'm talking with the data team to see, hey, for example, the last time they went on inside the app, I don't have that in the CRM. So we are working on having that inside the CRM to have it on the report. So definitely that's a good point. And like you mentioned about the different events, obviously for each product it would be different. Here, if I don't know for you, but if I'm you had a data team also to help you with that. Who was the person who was helping you with what are the key events that you are tracking on the report?
I worked with demand gen, product marketing, CS,
Okay.
customer success to understand all of those metrics. I was just looking to be as successful as possible. So I talked to every
Yep.
team that would have some sort of like touch on this. And I really do think customer success is they need a lot more love because they get to work with the customers. They get to see the impact. They
Yep.
get to understand like what the usage is like. So on a regular basis, like they also know who's going to renew based on usage. So having those conversations with them is super important. And if you don't have your own CSM kind of person, I've been in that position, own it. Take ownership of that and figure it out for yourself. Find people outside of your organization, understand how they've gone about it, what kind of tools they're using, whether it is in Salesforce or HubSpot or some business analytic tool, or your product tool. Like ask questions, see how other people are setting it up so that it can be, because the goal is to get it as unified as possible. I think when you have like 5, 10 tools you have to go to find these different data points, it makes it really conflicting. And so if you can start making your own reports, start finding the people and places that these tools connect, it'll make your life a lot easier.
Completely aligned on what you said about talking to the CS team, because like you mentioned, they're seeing the pattern on how they use the products, for how customers are using the products. So I think that's a really good point. Earlier you mentioned you had power user, late users, and past users also for the PLG motion. Can you give us some example on how you will approach a past user, for example, and a light user?
So when I start seeing an account like light up, what I try to do, and if you can ask for it, see if you can restart their trials. Because now, you've already got maybe 1 or 2 new signups. Try to get those old people back in so that it's like you have now what, 5, 10 active users. That makes the opportunity a lot more likely to convert and be richer and build a business case. If there's, instead of 2, you now have somebody, not only that, like 8 other users that are potentially familiar and ready to go at bat if you reignite their interest in the product. It's also great for expansion opportunities. I don't think people talk a lot about this, but once you get your foot in the door and you've got some like light users and some old users, like get those people in the conversation. They know your product, and if you are gonna do a pilot, or there's opportunities to bring the product in because they're talking with your AEs, like this is the best time to talk to those people who have already used the product. And you can also help understand some of the potential objections of like, why didn't they decide to move forward then, right? They're going to have some sort of weird experience in your product that could throw your deal off. It's really good information to know.
And I know we didn't talk about the expansion because when we were talking the first time, actually, that's where also we started to talk about PLG, because Max, your old manager at Muir, mentioned that each month you are going after one account and you could hit quota with just one account. If we still talk about expansion, so when you get one meeting, did you find what was your approach after getting one meeting within an account? So you are going after each team, or what was your process?
Yeah, so we did a land and expand model there. So I had the opportunity to, and it's not even just an expansion on already existing customers, you can expand on a net new opportunity, right? If your product can touch multiple departments, this is where multi-threading comes in really, really well. You can literally say, hey, we're working with this department, they're solving, or this team, we're helping them solve this. Do you want to be a part of the conversation as well? And you reach out to new teams I would say set up a schedule where you do like net new today, expansion opportunities today, and then, kind of juggle that out. But yeah, I would pretty much target one or two very large companies or companies that had a lot of teams. And then once I got my foot in the door with one team that I knew was like ripe, I would literally look up every director, manager, VP, and all the other departments and start messaging them based on those conversations that we had. And I think this also like comes to making sure that you follow along on your deals, because that'll give you intel on like how you go about messaging and how you can craft better conversations based on what you know already in the account.
To go back on the first call, because so you were talking about this right now, and earlier we were talking about this, and you were talking about being a product expert. How was being a product expert on the first call? How has this approach affected your conversion rate compared to a more traditional sales call?
I had an 80% conversion rate, so I would say it affects things pretty well because you have a very clear understanding. And mind you, make sure you reach out to the right titles. Don't just go reaching out to know some, there's going to be a lot of end users. That's PLG. But if you get the right title, understand their pain in those conversations, relay that to your AE, you're going to have a higher chance of conversion. It's also probably going to have a higher chance of close one. I would say 71% of my opportunities closed. So it's going to, I highly encourage it. Even if you're in a non-PLG setting, if you learn enough and get that confidence from your AE to have those conversations, it'll help you learn more about your job and get better qualified opportunities through the door.
How do you deal with someone who is not ready to buy on this first call?
This goes back to that buyer enablement piece, right? Your job is to get them, especially if it's a target account, to a place where they are ready to buy. And that is giving them the right resources. It's teaching them how to use the product. It's showing them how to add friends to the conversation, inviting other users. That's like as simple as it gets. And you continue to nurture and send resources throughout those, like however long the trial is, or if they need an extension, you can do that too. Another potential way, and it depends on how you work the accounts with your AE, but if your AE is also open to having those kind of conversations, I would book that with the AE, let them introduce your AE as the product expert. That's a new meeting. Then your AE can do like a full disco, kind of give them that walk through the product and kind of do a informal pilot, as you would say. Like the way that my AE set it up with me is that, all right, let's kind of get them in for that product expert conversation. And then what we'll do is set them up with a trial where they can invite 10 of their teammates for like 2 weeks, and then and let them use the product fully. And that led to a lot of like good opportunities and close one.
We talk a lot about being a product expert. So how do you keep track of every updates on the product to make sure you are still learning, being to be a product expert? Because I imagine for a tool like Mural, you had like updates every week. So what was your process for that?
You don't want to be that deep of a product expert. Learn the fundamental why around your product. That way you can convey to people, like, what's the purpose here? And
Yeah.
then pick three to five top key features of the product and understand the why behind those, so that when you're having these conversations with people, you can extend the conversation by saying, like, use this product when and why, because that's what matters most. And then also know like your resources. Yeah, I'm sure you have like a help library or something. And then you're even cooler if you send like 3 cool templates and some resources afterwards, and that kind of keeps the conversation going too. Like, hey, we spoke about this on the call. We talked about these 3 features. Here's some additional resources that could really help you as you move along. Um, but yeah, I mean, PLG is your product is typically pretty simple, so you should be able to pull out like a few things that like everybody likes to use and make sure that people feel empowered to use your product.
And I imagine, but here it's maybe me assuming, I imagine that if you are saying to different teams, your conversation or also the key features you are going to talk about will be different based on the team you are talking with.
There's a chance. Depends on the your product. I would say it's not necessarily the key features, but it's the use case.
The use case, yeah.
With Mural, we would talk to like consultants, we would talk to product. Consultants are going to use it to collaborate between external vendors.
Yeah.
They'll still be using similar features. It's just that's their use case. Whereas if you talk to somebody in product, they're going to be like, oh, well, I need to run sprints and agile kind of activities. So it's just a different use case, but they'll probably be using very similar features. So you need to know your personas and what their use cases are really well.
Great point, because right now, like Joseph, the use case for on my side, we are working mainly with marketing agencies, for example. They are going to use the same feature as other industries, but the use case will be different because, like the consultant for you at Mural, they are working with their customers, and they are going to use some specific tools for their customers, features for their customers. And we have some other businesses, but they're going to use it internally, for example, to show it to the board or to show it to their superior. So something I really like what you mentioned about is being a product expert, because like you were saying earlier, we were talking about the PLG motion versus the sales-led motion, where maybe a sales-led motion, you need to understand obviously your product and what your product can solve. But here, because the product is simple, you need to be more, you need to learn how to use it, or maybe talk about the use cases, because that's something you can use. Because on my side, I always thought, as an SDR, I never worked for PLG motion, so I say, I don't care too much about how to use the product. I know more about the pains we are solving on the business impact, but now I get it. So thanks for talking about this.
Yeah, I think it's super important.
Beyond the tools or the processes you mentioned, are there any other resources you find valuable for your prospecting activities in a PLG environment?
I'm pretty old school. I use like a spreadsheet, but I would use something to keep track of the teams you're reaching out to and the different use cases and who you're talking to. I'm sure you would do that in a non-PLG setting, but I think it's even more critical here to be that extra organized.
I imagine. And last question, actually, of the show. For sales rep working in a PLG environment, aiming to improve their prospecting skills, what's the one piece of advice you believe made the biggest difference in your success?
Make best friends with your CSMs. They know a lot. They know product data probably better than anybody else. But they also know how those things have tied to the impact it's had on your customers. Those people are really smart, and it's going to teach you a lot in the long run. And then keep experimenting, keep digging into the data, because sometimes there's things people won't see that you could see because you have a different point of view, and value that, own that, and bring new ideas to the table. I think now more than ever, part of being strategic is also being experimental.
Perfect. Dorothy, thank you so much for being on the show today. Before we end the episode, do you have anything else do you want to share with the audience?
You can follow me on LinkedIn for more tips. I also have a newsletter that I'm putting out with my best friend, Austin Jewett. It's called DNA Prospecting. But yeah, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to help if you need, you want to go dive deeper on any of this.
We do. I'm going to add your LinkedIn profile into the show notes, but also your newsletter.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being on the show, and for everyone listening. I'll see you on the next episode.
All right, thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to leave a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. So for Spotify, to leave a review, what you can do is you can use your phone, then go on the Spotify app, then you go to the SDR game page, and then at the top of the page, you can leave a review. It's a 5-star review if you enjoyed the episode, obviously. And then if you are listening to this episode on Apple Podcasts, feel free also to leave a review on your app. Thanks for listening, and I see you on the next episode.